Okay, good evening, everybody. Hopefully the presentation will appear in a second, and I do apologise in advance if I do have to invite at the end of every sentence the next slide to go on. But if we're kind of doing it, Miss Meakin is kindly doing the slides for Mr. Hartford and myself this evening. Anyhow. Yeah, again, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And really, this evening is just an opportunity for you to ask any questions about the recent information that we shared with you last week around our CATs, or cognitive ability tests, and STAR reading ages. We have put a short presentation together just to say a little bit about what both those tests are about and how we use them in the academy, and also some suggestions for you as parents about what those scores can mean and how you will be able to help your sons and daughters with them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the CATS tests first and just go through that, and then I'll hand on to Mr. Hartford, who will talk through the STAR reading tests that we've done. And then there's a good opportunity for us to have a discussion and answer any of your questions. So thank you. So if you wouldn't mind going on to the first slide, please. So the CAT tests took place at the beginning of October, and it's the first year that the Academy have done them. And one of the main reasons that we signed up for the CATs and tests is because there was no SATs at the end of year 6. And what we wanted to be able to do is to get a baseline for all our year 7 students, but also it was an opportunity for us to be able to look at the students and assess the best ways that they learn, and the way that they think about tasks and the way that they solve problems in their learning, because that information is really useful to us as teachers. The CAT, it's actually called the CAT4 test, and the reason it's the CAT4 test, it's the 4th generation of these tests, but there does happen to be 4 areas to these assessments, and the first of those is what they call non-verbal reasoning, which is about thinking about shapes and patterns and the way people would interpret those. There's the verbal reasoning, which is thinking with words. The quantitative reasoning, which is thinking with numbers, and then finally the last one, which is the spatial ability, which is thinking about shape and space together and imagining how those shapes can change and move. Sometimes that's called formal thinking or formal modelling. If you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide, please. So the actual tests were carried out, and those 4 areas were examined throughout the tests, and they were known as batteries. And when the tests were carried out, they were all done through the iPads, and everybody was either invited to bring their own earphones in or to have some of the Academy earphones, and then they listened to the instructions around the test, and they sat there, and each of the tests you will were a multiple choice, but they worked through those 4 areas: the verbal reasoning, the quantitative, the non-verbal, and the spatial ability. And if you've got the report that was sent home to you last week to hand, you will see examples of some of the questions that were set on pages 3 and 4 of your report. And then when you go on to page 5, you will see basically the results of those tests, which is the profile. And so there's a green bar which represents the scores that were achieved in each of those 4 areas. So that's the profile that's resulted, and that also comes back to us in the Academy. So you could just go on to the next slide, please. So how is it useful to us, and how are we going to use that information? The most important thing for us, it's a really useful starting point for us to have a discussion about how best each of our new year 7 students learn, and what we can do to make sure that they reach their potential within school. It's also really useful for teachers to understand how, not just how they learn, but how they think. And what kind of thinking biases that they might have. Some students might be more biased towards the verbal way of thinking, and then that then therefore they would benefit from certain teaching strategies, while other students may be biased more to a spatial way of thinking or a quantitative mathematical way of thinking. And again, there are benefits to there's different different teaching techniques which would benefit those students. It also really then, on the back of those discussions, helps us thinking about what kind of pace of learning would be right for the individuals, what kind of additional support would be needed, and what kind of challenge would be needed to, again, to make sure that the potential is reached. And then finally, the last area which we use them is just one starting point for us to start to think about potential for GCSE as well. And we take this CATS information along with other information and feed it into a system developed by a group called the Fisher Family Trust. And that's where we get our targets for GCSE from, and they generate some targets for GCSEs. And you will see those targets in the first round of reports that you'll get just before Christmas. And then finally, in the last slide, just put down a few ideas about how the report can help you and how it can help at home. So there's a report, a profile that I've put up there. You see the green bars across there, and you can see that this person is very strong in the quantitative and the spatial ways of thinking. And so they may have a preference towards using visual images and pictures in their learning. So the tips for learning would be that it's really important that they read everything very carefully and check that they understand the task. That spatial and visual approaches to learning, for example, watching a film when studying a text, watching a film of that text, or choosing books with text and pictures, or making charts and mind maps when revising and things like that are really useful techniques for this kind of person, or this kind of learning. And when reading, it's sometimes useful. This person likes an idea of the bigger picture, so it's a good idea to scan the book first and take in the headings, the diagrams and the illustrations to get that overview before reading through a book is a good idea for this kind of person. And making notes using pictures and diagrams and color coding notes and text would be helpful too, and it's likely to enjoy the science and the technology. So everybody's report on page 5 will give you a list of types of techniques that could be used to aid learning either at home or in the classroom at school. So that sort of hopefully gives you a little bit of an insight into what cognitive ability tests are about, and the first of the reports that you got last week. So what we're going to do now is hand over to Mr. Hartford, and he's going to talk a little bit about reading scores.
I am indeed, yeah. Ms. Meakin, are you able to present? Perfect. Are you presenting? Sorry, I can't see anything on my screen.
No, I just thought it was important we saw your face.
Perfect.
So I'll go back to the presentation
I apologise for people having to see my face. But anyway, right, what I want to talk about specifically is alongside the comprehensive battery of tests that all the Year 7 students have completed, they also complete a reading assessment with us using the STAR reading test. The reason behind this is obviously we need to know reading age so as we can identify areas of strength and support students who need extra work with their literacy. STAR reading assessments take about 15 minutes of an English lesson once every half term, and they allow us to track reading ages as well as producing something called a normed reference standardizing score. It sounds complex, but it's not at all. All it is it compares children nationally who have the same date of birth. The maximum value is 150. The average score is 100 with an average range of 95 to 102. So if a child is between 95 and 102, they're in line with age expectations. And then a score of below 85 means that we step in and intervene. A score of 111 or above is exceeding age expectations. It's a nationally used reading assessment, and it's extremely useful in identifying students that we need to support, but also identifying where your children are nationally, and just how good a job we're doing at Poole Academy when compared to a full national picture. Would you mind moving on, please? Right, okay, so once the students have done the test, that's one thing, but how do we actually go about supporting literacy and supporting the development of literacy at Poole Academy? Our core tool is the Accelerated Reader and the Star Reader program. Now, Accelerated Reader, all students have access to the library, COVID secure, of course, and they get books, they read the books, and then they are quizzed via the Accelerated Reader program. And that's great because it's actually building good habits and encouraging students to read. Alongside that, though, we have a really strong program of promotion. We've got a literacy calendar, which has a whole load of competitions and various bits and pieces. We've got the 50 Literacy Things booklets where students are challenged to do literacy-based tasks. I don't know if any of your children mentioned today the book fairies, which has gone live on the website. A whole load of Year 7s have sent me the book fairy logo that they've managed to find, so I owe them books, and unfortunately it means tomorrow I've got to dress up in a pair of fairy wings and go into various different classes. Alongside of that, we've got daily reading going on. We have the word of the week and the register, read and respond activities in registration sessions. On top of that, for those students who need interventions, we've got 4 core intervention strategies. We've got the Reading Eggs, we've got the Skills Academy, which happens once a week on a Tuesday. We have one-to-one reading, and we also have a fantastic online program called Achieve 3000. For those of you whose children are involved in any of those, there's more information that comes home with them. Could we just move on one more, please? Thanks. The final slide from me really is about, it's a plea. It's asking for support from you, because if we all work together, we can do a really good job of improving literacy. And research, as I'm sure you know, has shown that reading helps cognitive development. Students who read at home do significantly better across the curriculum, including 9.9% better in maths than students who don't read. And just some things that you can do to support us and you can do to support your child. If you get the opportunity to read with your child, ask them about the books that they're reading at home. If you're ever asked after book suggestions, I'm obsessed with reading, and I've got huge numbers of book lists that I'll add to the appropriate areas of the website so that you can look at age-appropriate books to share and enjoy with your child. Help them with their 50 Things challenges. The more that they can engage with literacy on a daily basis, the more that will embed those fantastic habits. And again, talk about the word of the week. Communication around reading builds good habits. More importantly, just know I'm here. And if you need to discuss anything, just send me an email and I'll get straight back to you. And that hopefully gives you a flavour of what we're doing here at Poole Academy with literacy. So please, as I said, it's the end of my bit. Fire any questions or just drop me an email if you prefer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hartford. So now really it's your opportunity, if you've got any questions at all regarding the CATS tests or the reading assessments or the literacy program that we have running at the Academy, please put them in the comment box there. Obviously, you might have some questions that just relate to your son and daughter, and if that's the case, I understand that you might want to email us separately, and of course, please do that. Yeah.
Well, that's one of those moments, Mr. Ward, where you ask the class, do they know are they happy? and you hope that they are. Just to let you know, Mr. Ward, I don't know if you're aware that there were a few parents, unfortunately, that have been unable to click on the link. Okay. So it might be that we run this as a presentation again, just so a few more people can join at that point. I guess a question for me then is actually, what if I'm looking at that CATS test and I'm still unsure or I'm concerned? Who do I reach out to?
So one of the best people to reach out to in a few weeks will be a lead tutor who's going to be in place for all Year 7 students, and they will have that information, and they can talk to you in detail about your son and daughter's learning. But also, you know, for probably a little bit more of an oversight view, certainly reach out to myself, and you know, I can talk to you, and we can arrange a phone call to go through the report in a little bit more detail, and you know, so I can give you a bit more of the background about how it works, and a little bit more about the background about how it can be used effectively to promote further learning.
Fab. Okay, so we'll make sure that when we push this recording out that we put your email address there, just in case parents
Yes, please. Yeah.
want to have a chat. How about actually, you know, what if I'm worried? What if I thought that things were okay, and I'm now thinking actually that doesn't reflect what I was thinking? You know, is that unusual?
I think that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of things to bear in mind whenever looking at these tests. These are just one-off assessments. You know, they happen in a period of time, and it's really been quite interesting because that period of time that we did these assessments comes at the end of a long period of national schools closure. And one of the things that we did with if you like, the mean data just for the school, no individual data, but the mean data, we share that with other schools in Cornwall, and they found a similar pattern to us, that we think that the period of national schools closure, particularly for Year 6 students coming into Year 7, has had a little bit of an impact on their learning, on their reading scores, and on their CATS scores as well. And so, you know, some of the comparisons that are made within the report that you got sent home will be against last year's national scores. Now, I didn't really mention that in my presentation because the reason being is that was last year's national scores, and the indication is that this year's national scores are going to be quite different from that. So I think it's worth bearing in mind they are a one-off, and they are a test that have been sat on the back of quite a unique context. But what it gives us as a school now is a really strong idea about what we need to do and how we can continue to work with our students to make sure that you know, that we're very clear about everybody's potential, but you know, we're really clear about how we can get them to fulfill that potential through our different teaching styles.
Fab. So I can see a question. Shall I read it to you? Super. So it says, so obviously students are not in sets currently. So how are you ensuring that the stretch and challenge and that lessons are fully differentiated? It's a brilliant question. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So in terms of our expectations of teachers, in terms of their planning, and obviously in their delivery, that they do differentiate their resources, that they make sure that the support is there for students, but there's also extension and the stretch activities for students. We are on the back of teaching cycle 1, when we've done assessments, and it's assessment week next week, we will then begin to set our students in Year 7. So the 4 teaching groups that we have, A, B, C, and D, will be streamed, and that will begin in time for teaching cycle 2, which starts the week before Christmas. So I've got a couple more questions coming in here. One from Jess Fox to say, yes, that's the case. There will be in sets just before Christmas. And then one from Grace Snooky, isn't spatial difficult to demonstrate to the class? How is this being developed? Yeah, it's a really, really good point, actually. I mean, I can talk from a science point of view, being a science teacher, that actually that spatial, having a spatial thinking mind is really important. When you talk about things like the structure of an atom, which is very abstract, because we can't actually see what the structure of an atom is. So we have to develop models, and people have to develop those models in their mind, and they need to know that the electrons are rotating around the outside, et cetera, and what that means in terms of the properties of the element that the atom is from. So in all areas of our curriculum, we will expect students to develop those kind of abstract models in their mind, and that sort of spatial ability to be able to think in that way. And we do that through various means in terms of diagrams and models, using the visual ways through sometimes videos, etc. But it's about sometimes letting the students find their best way, the way that's going to work for them to be able to represent the model. So use of assessment and questions about how you would apply that model are really important at that stage. But you touch on an area that is quite a challenge for us as teachers, to be able to develop that spatial thinking in class. I've got another one here. You advise these are one-off tests. They are not going to be retested to check progression. Yeah, okay, so that's a good point. They are one-off tests. We can do them again at the beginning of year 8, possibly even year 9. So there are further CATS tests that we can do, and that's something that we might consider doing. They are not, when you say about to test progress, they're not there to test whether people's knowledge and understanding has increased, because the way that the CATS work is that they are tests that look at the way that people think. They're not based on any kind of prior learning or prior knowledge. You can't prepare for these tests or revise for them. It's just a way of actually us assessing what way they think about the different areas of learning. So in terms of their use for us, it's telling us about them as learners, and then that information goes back into us and the discussions that we have amongst us about our students, and how best to be able to teach them. I hope that's kind of given you a little bit of an insight about why we actually did them, the purpose behind them. Yeah, so Miss Meakin's coming with a question here about assessment week. So I hope you're all aware that next week is assessment week. And so that will mean that we've come to almost the end of teaching cycle 1. So we've had a good 10 weeks of teaching and learning. And then during this week, in each of these subjects, there will be an extended assessment around the knowledge and learning from that teaching cycle. And we will use that information, as I said, to basically then to design our curriculums going forward. But crucially, we'll use that information to design the super teaching week. So the week after the assessment week, the following week is PSHE week. So there'll be normal lessons on the Monday and Tuesday, and the Wednesday and Thursday we have 2 days dedicated to personal, social and health education. And then the Friday is a staff training day. And then when we come back after that, we go into the super teaching week. So the assessments that were sat during assessment weeks will have all been marked and will be analysed. And the teachers will look at the areas that the students have done well in, and they'll look at the areas that the students haven't done so well in. And they will then focus their teaching for that week on those areas where there's still a few deficits and there's still a few misconceptions and there's still things that we need to put right. So we've got that week to do that before we jump into the next teaching cycle, which is the last week of term. So we've got a lot to turn around, and that's why we've got a staff training day in there, so it allows teachers to come together for an extended period of time to moderate their assessments, to check those assessments, to redesign their curriculums, to design that super teaching week so it's going to be as effective as possible. So that's what will be happening in the next few weeks. But next week is assessment week. Good.
We have reached that point, that Mr. Ward, that we are at the end of the current questions. Obviously, if any parents have got any more, please feel free to add them. And as Mr. Ward has said throughout, if anybody's got any questions, if you'd like to talk to us, we are always here, whether that's a video call or a phone call, or if needed, a face-to-face meeting. But let's, we are here to help, and we know that it's been an unusual term. And a difficult one, because those things that we ordinarily would have done, we've not been able to do. But hopefully this evening has helped you to understand exactly what those reports meant, and actually what we're going to do with them moving forward. Are there any, I'm just going to pause for a second, just see if there are any further questions for this evening. While we're just waiting, Mr. Hartford, I just wanted to confirm that you will be dressing up in fairy rings tomorrow.
I have, 3 people who've bizarrely volunteered to bring them in for me. So, there's no way out of it.
And I have to say, the Book Fairy is such a wonderful initiative. And, I saw that last year bringing a lot of joy across not just our school, but beyond. And actually that love of reading is so important. Mr. Hartford, is there anything else? If we were going to do, one thing, what would we do? How can we really give ourselves that boost in these dark nights and as we approach the end of teaching cycle 1?
Oh, right. Well, going back to literacy, it's opening a good book, isn't it? It's settling down with a book and losing yourself in it completely. I know I'm biased, but it's just such an important, wonderful way of spending your time.
And I think it is fair that you are biased, but understandably so. We actually don't have any further questions. So as I said, obviously, if there's anything that you would like to talk to us more about, please, contact Mr. Ward or myself, and Mr. Hartford would be very happy to answer any of those questions about literacy. We have, just as I've been filling the time, Mr. Ward, one more question. Would you like me to read it to you?
That's a really, really sensible question. So as year 7 are effectively a bubble, but we do have the different classes in there. The idea is that we will reset them into new teaching groups. So we can't set for every different subject. So it won't be that they'll be going to a different set for different subjects. So we will have a stream, a top stream, a middle stream, and then a support stream. And they will be distributed across set A, set B and C, and set D. But we can't, at the moment, have a situation where we've got students going to one set for maths and then another set for English. And so maybe I might have misled some of you then, so I do apologise about that. But that's going to be our first stage. Hopefully soon we will be able to be a bit more flexible with our timetable and go back to something like it would have been, and then there's a real opportunity for us to bring setting into the different subjects as well.
Okay, so at this point I'm going to draw the evening to a close. Super, thank you very much. But yeah, I'm going to draw the evening to a close. I'm going to say thank you to everybody who attended, and I am sorry to those parents who initially the link wasn't working. We've just investigated that, but hopefully you've been able to join us now. If you've got any questions, we're here to help. And otherwise, have a lovely evening, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.